This video was filmed in November 2024 as part of the Heart of Sexual Violence Prevention and Advocacy Core Training created and offered by the Ripple Project under a grant from OCVA known as the Statewide Impact Initiative to provide training and technical assistance during fiscal years 2024 and 2025. Hi, welcome to Legal Advocacy and Court Orders. I'm your host, Rosalinda Noriega with the Ripple Project. Today we'll be hearing from Sherri Donley. Sherri is owner and operator of Greater Justice PS. She's a legal advocate with over 16 years serving survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. In this video, Sherri presents on court orders and legal advocacy, including protection orders and other legal documents. Sherri shares a wealth of information. Be sure to check out the other supplemental materials and links provided at the end of this video.
Thank you. Good morning. Hi, I'm Sherri Donley, and I own Greater Justice PS, which is a document preparation company. I actually acquired the name through an attorney during COVID because I had nothing else to do, right? But be home and do advocacy work and have kids at home, and why not start a business, So my business is unique because I prep family law documents, protection orders, guardianships, things like that with an attorney review. So I have an attorney that I pay as a contractor, a good friend of mine. She's been practicing law for 30 years. So that's what I do now. But I have been, first of all, I'm a survivor of domestic violence and sexual assault. I was in a marriage for 25 years where there were both of those things were happening in that marriage. I was a child bride. I was married barely 16 years old. Like my birthday is February. We were married April, and I was a mother with my first child a year later. And there was a lot of sexual violence and domestic violence in that. I also am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, which I didn't know until I was an adult because I had no memory of it. So that was disclosed as an adult, which was weird. But I have no memory of that. I have been an advocate, and that is something that will never go away. I'm in legal law business, but you're still an advocate. It will never go away. I have been a domestic violence sexual assault advocate, and I retired, quote unquote, retired in July 31st. But I still work with them. It's Hope Alliance. So I was with Hope Alliance in Lewis County in Centralia for 5 years. I worked at Turning Point out in Mason County for 10 years. And I started out as a receptionist and then made my way up to program coordinator and really missed advocacy. So I went right back to legal advocacy. And then I left that agency in 2018. And I have a degree in paralegal studies. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an attorney, so I can't give legal advice. I'm in the process of working that right now, though, to become a lawyer. So I'm in process. So I've got, paralegal studies by degree and by profession, and I love law. I love family law, which is crazy. But I have walked thousands of people through their, domestic violence or sexual assault, whether it's children, adults, or other. So dealing with the court system has really been an interesting journey for me. But that's kind of my background. At this point, I went full-time in July of this year to run my business and just took that leap of faith. And that's what I'm doing now. And so what I was invited to do today was to talk about legal advocacy within, sexual assault. Am I taking clients from nonprofits for the trail of DVPO or representation? Are you asking if I'm going to assist clients in those arenas pro bono? As a matter of fact, I do. So since I live in Centralia and I just left Hope Alliance, I do work still since July. Again, advocacy's in me. I still will periodically take on pro bono clients. At Turning Point, Mason County, and Hope Alliance, I started a legal clinic. They work with, it used to be Thurston County Volunteer Legal Clinic. They now changed their name to South Sound Law Services for Pro Bono and Northwest Justice Project. So both of those places, I started the legal clinic, and they're still running. And so periodically I'll get a call for somebody to ask if I can assist in doing the documents, because a lot of times in those arenas, they do protection orders, they'll help with family law, that sort of thing, or rental law. But they really don't have the time to sit with a client and actually do the paperwork. So with Hope Alliance, for instance, I'll go over their office, which isn't very far from me, and I'll sit with a client for a couple hours and help them fill out their paperwork. The advocates there are trained. It's a dual program. Hope Alliance is a dual program, and so is Turning Point, and many others, where they can do and produce protection orders. So I hope that help answers that question. So one of the things is legal advocacy. Does anybody know what that is, or are you a legal advocate, or what your roles in your agency you're with?
Well, actually, I am just a DV advocate, and we do the protection orders and fill out the forms and do the statement, declaration, and serve the papers. And also, well, with RIWA, actually, we are not only DV advocates. So we do housing, immigration, job search, and, like shelters and like every single thing we do. But the most priority thing is that if a client is in an emergency situation, and we do try to find out a resource, but we are not allowed to give them like legal advice. We are
Perfect.
just
Yep.
doing the paperwork.
Yep. Perfect. Thank you for sharing. How do you pronounce your name?
Fauzia.
Fauzia. Thank you. What agency do you work for?
RIWA, Refugee Women Alliance.
Okay, I've never heard of them. So,
oh, you didn't? I think RIWA is very famous, according to myself.
Well, you can always reach out to me. I can. That's one of the things. Hopefully, that by the end of our little session here is that I'll put my information in there. You guys are more than welcome to reach out. I love giving out free resources to everywhere. I have learned over the years where to look, right? As you're an advocate, you find these little niches of where to look for free stuff, right? For free help.
Yeah, because we have a close relationship with NJP, so that's really great.
Perfect. Yeah. So those are really great things to have, because the business I do, a lot of my clients right now, I'd say about half are right now private clients are in a domestic violence situation or sexual assault situation. So trying to get out and manage and navigate. So hopefully I can get a lot of your information as well, so that I can pass on to different people. So I appreciate that. Well, legal advocacy, you're right, Fazia, is that you are not allowed to give legal advice. There is a law, it's an RCW, it's they call it a GR 24, a General Rule 24. And the court rules say that unless you're an attorney, even producing documents like protection orders, restraining orders, family law stuff, you're not allowed to do that or tell them what you're supposed to give them, because it's against the law. It's a $5,000 fine, and it's a 1 year in jail if you get in trouble and popped basically with a unlawful practice of law. The really cool thing, though, is that with advocates in your agency, then you are allowed to do and produce and help with the client to draft, protection orders, sexual assault protection orders, that sort of thing. Even legal paperwork like parenting plans and stuff like that. So you are allowed, as long as the client's with you, telling you what they want in their paperwork. You're not allowed to tell them what they need in their paperwork, because then you're giving out, law. So that is really important. One of the things I wanted to share with you folks is, so that's why I want to make sure that you knew what legal advocacy is entailed. Also, with that, you are allowed to, with the legal advocacy, you're allowed to attend any court hearing. You're allowed to attend any kind of criminal court hearing. If you've never been in a criminal court hearing with a client ever, it's a very fascinating process. And that sounds weird to say that, but it really is. You learn a lot. Just a fun fact, lawyers, just because they go to law school, they come out of law school, they really don't know what they're doing. They know law, but they don't know the paperwork. They don't know process and procedure. When they go into an attorney's firm, it's the paralegals that teach them what paperwork they're supposed to be doing. So when you are dealing with a client, when you're handling a client and they're in a sexual assault situation, especially, and that's what we're going to talk about today, is sexual assault protection orders. What does it look like? But just know that you're allowed to attend those meetings and those hearings. You're going to have prosecutors that say, no, you're not allowed, right? Yes, you are. By law, you are. And I have a form that I'm actually going to share really quick. So this is RCW. I don't know if you've ever seen it before. And this talks about who's qualified for privileged communication, but it also talks about down here in number 7, as I'm highlighting it real quick. This talks about a sexual assault advocate. And of course, we all know about confidentiality, right? You're not allowed, to speak to anybody about your case or the client or disclose things like that. But within the legal realm, you are allowed to, with the client's permission, to talk to prosecutors. That's one of the things that part of advocacy that we do is to be able to assist them in different kinds of areas of law. And if you've ever been in a courtroom for any kind of a protection order, you're allowed to sit at the table. You're not allowed to talk to the judge on behalf of the client, but you're allowed to be there to support the client. And this involves and also includes, criminal law. If there is a sexual assault case, whether it's children, adults, whatever, you guys are allowed to be in those places. Attorneys will tell you no, that it's privileged communication, but this is privileged communication as well. So it's a matter of just knowing that you are allowed. I've come across many advocates over the years, new ones especially, who just don't know. They think that they have to sit in the galley of the courtroom while their clients up front by themselves. You're allowed to sit in those places with them, okay? You guys are allowed to draft the documents, like I said. So that's what legal advocacy is that you're allowed to be in those places and you're allowed to, assist people. The next thing I want to talk about is sexual assault protection orders. 2 years ago, the legislators have changed the law with, like, for instance, domestic violence, okay? To add coercive behavior now as considered domestic violence. So like yelling and screaming and at somebody and all the financial abuse, all those things that we've been screaming about that's not physical. It is now, legislators have changed the law 2 years ago in August, actually, that now we are allowed to add those things. And by doing that, they actually put all of protection orders where sexual assault, protection orders, domestic violence, vulnerable adult, all of those protection orders are now, they used to be separate. Now they're all on one. They're all on one document. And I think it's like 20 pages long. It's ridiculously long. They are on the Washington Court website under protection orders, and it'll show a list of different protection orders. But really, it's on one order now. And that was a lot. It was super confusing. It took us a long time to help navigate that protection order. But that is something that if you have a survivor of sexual assault coming to you, they are allowed to file that, and you're allowed to fill it out with them. Evidence is not necessary. It is helpful, but it's not necessary. I had posted on here the link for the RCW 70105 that we're looking at right now. And it talks about a petitioner and what it entails. A sexual assault protection order must allege the existence of non-consensual conduct and non-consensual sexual penetration. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be just that. It's like unwanted touching, all the things that we've been talking about for sexual assault, right? It's not just about penetration. It's about all the unwanted touching, those kinds of things. So that is something that if you haven't filled it out, I would encourage you to go to the website, the Washington Court's website, if you feel like you need one of those forms, you want to look at it, go to WashingtonHealthLaw.org. If you go to that website, and you like put in the search for sexual assault protection order or protection order, it'll actually bring up forms that they have on their website. That website is ran by Northwest Justice Project. So they're the ones that upload all the different forms. So if you can't find something, go there. And generally there's a form already on their website. A sexual assault protection order can be filled out by anybody who is 15 years or older. If you have somebody who's under the age of 15, then they have to have somebody help them, meaning that there has to be a parent or a guardian. It could be a friend of the family, somebody who's willing to step up and help. Because when it comes to sexual assault, we know that it does not discriminate. It doesn't care what community you're coming from. It doesn't care what age you are. Sexual assault is all about control. And so when you're working with young minors, right, in your agency, just understanding that a 15-year-old can go get a sexual assault protection order. An advocate can assist in doing that. Advocates can assist a 13-year-old coming into their agency, because the age of 13, they are allowed to access medical and help and all of those things. But at a 13-year-old, they would need somebody, a family friend or a parent or somebody to help fill out the paperwork with them. But at 15, they can do it themselves and submit it and file it, which is crazy to think that a 15-year-old, a minor, but they're allowed. And you're allowed to help them do that. You know, at that point, it would be still a mandated reporting, right? because they're a minor. They still have to, it's still mandated reporting for sexual abuse. But that is something that is really important to understand. What age are we allowed to assist these people? It can be very confusing. So a sexual assault protection order, that's where you can find it, or on the court website. The great thing about the sexual assault protection order, I really want to stress on that, is that it can be filed for free at your local courthouse, Superior Court. Now, if there is a criminal case, there's already going to be a no contact order put in place, or a sexual assault protection order put in place through the criminal system, and that would be through a prosecutor's office. If somebody is trying to get it on their own, of course, that's going to be through Superior Court at your local court, wherever you're living, okay, whatever the county you're living in. And so, a sexual assault protection order can also be filed in a county where the actual incident happened. That's also something that is allowed. It doesn't have to necessarily just be in your county. It can be in the county where the assault happened. I had a case real quick one time where the sexual assault, the person actually lived out of state. They were here for like a holiday with their family. It was a minor, and the minor was sexually assaulted by a cousin. And they filed a sexual assault protection order here in our county, and then went back home and handled the case back there. The case was here, but they were able to go home. Because when you file a sexual assault protection order, it just has to be in the county, again, where you live, or where the incident happened. With a sexual assault protection order or any kind of court hearing, also, the really great thing about COVID, I know it sounds silly, but is that it allowed the opportunity to go to court by Zoom or by WebEx or by video, phone call, whatever. So if you have a client that's coming in that needs, to go to court for this kind of protection order, any protection order, just know that they don't have to be in the courtroom. They can appear by Zoom. They can appear, by video. The great thing about that is if you're working with somebody, you can be with them, and it can be in your office, hold a hearing in your office or wherever. So I just really want to put it out there. I've gotten a lot of times where people were thinking they had to be in the courtroom with their perpetrator, and you don't have to be. And sometimes the comfort of that is to know that, yes, you're going to look at that person, or they're going to look at that person, but they don't necessarily have to be in the same space. So that's kind of just a little extra there for you when you go to work with folks like that. Okay. You guys have been talking about with sexual assault and LGBTQ community. That's really important. for these underserved communities, as I call them. And we had a case here in Lewis County, actually, 2 years ago, and it was a trans woman was murdered by her partner in front of their child. Her name was Ricky. And, you know, we helped walk the family through that whole process. That was hard. It was really hard. And part of the process of advocacy in the legal world is also advocating for if that person or that community is having to go through the legal system, whether they're the victim or the victim's family or whatever, it's really getting the courts to understand their community. It took us a long time to try to even get them to recognize that Ricky was identified as female. She was, her birth certificate was changed, everything, her whole life. That's Ricky was female. And so, and having the courts go through and at every court hearing go off of anatomy, it was really difficult, you know. And Lewis County is very much truly back in the 60s. They're very Republican here. They are definitely about NRA. And I refer to Hope Alliance because that's where I worked for the last 5 years. But they've been the squeaky wheel in this community for rights for LGBTQ in that community, okay? So when you are working with somebody who is having to go through those kinds of court systems, it's okay to advocate for their autonomy, right? And their identity and whatever, how they're presenting themselves. Because we want to make sure they're respected and honored and heard, right? And that's really important as an advocate going through this process, especially with the LGBTQ community and going through sexual assault hearings, because that all by itself is so much stigma attached to that. You know, like, what were the circumstances of them getting sexually assaulted? Were they drunk? Were they doing this? What were they wearing? You know, the usual stigma. And so it's really important for advocates to kind of be aware of what the rules are around, like, a sexual assault protection order, of what's expected in a courtroom in that kind of hearing. And it's okay to advocate for that. It's just really important for everybody to be up to speed. The next thing I'm sharing with you is, again, just about who's eligible for a sexual assault protection order. And I say that as well as a protection order, period, but sexual assault especially. This is just a little fun fact. I'm going to go ahead and share this for you guys. I found this online. I didn't create this myself because I love resources online. And so this just talks about, and this is up to date, as you can see, since August, who is actually eligible. So these, I would really encourage you to have these kinds of documents kind of handy when you have people coming in. Again, that's what we were talking about earlier, who's eligible. Anybody is eligible. They have to be 15 and over at least to do it by themselves. If not, they have to have somebody else. And then I love that they have the RCWs. I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to law. I like the RCWs because it really spells out what these rules are for, okay? So I'm just going to kind of scroll through. We talked about how much does it cost. It doesn't cost anything. Can a sexual assault advocate come with me? Yes, absolutely. And where to find the form. So this was just a little extra tidbit for you guys to have on hand. The next thing, this is a really important one. The next thing I want to talk to you about, this is the Sexual Assault Protection Order Act. This is so important. This has been out for a while, but for whatever reason, the agency I work for, I didn't come across this until like last year for some reason. One of the things that I wanted to point out, it spells out what is a protection order, what does it cover, what are the RCWs for covering the any kind of legal proceedings for sexual assault. What are the definitions? It's such a great resource to have on hand. But what I really wanted to share about this, it's right here. I'm trying to highlight it for you. I don't know if that's helpful or not. Appointment of counsel, 7.90.070. This is so important. When you're dealing with it, because you can't give legal advice. You can't, it's so hard to help navigate somebody who's going through any kind of abuse, especially sexual assault. And then when it comes to kids, I mean, everybody's obviously important, but it's a matter of generally when you file a protection order, you're doing it on your own. You can hire an attorney if you want, but it's going to cost $5,000 to $7,000 for an attorney, just as a retainer. The really cool thing about this is that if you file a sexual assault protection order, the client does, and the other party, the perpetrator, hires an attorney, that usually kind of allow the client will get freaked out basically because they don't have anybody usually. This is part of the Sexual Assault Protection Act says that if the other party hires an attorney, you can request to have an attorney appointed to you for free in the courtroom. There's a caveat to that though, because what we have found is that the courts will say, well, we don't really have the funds for that. We don't have the money for that, which drives me nuts because yes, they do. They do have the money. They just don't want to. And that's where an advocate can really, if you know your courtroom and you know your commissioners, it's a really good idea to get to know, by the way, your court system in your local community. Going to the courthouse, be friends with the clerks, befriend the clerks, be nice to them, you know, be present in the courtroom because those commissioners start to see how you are interacting and helping them and you're helping your client. So when it comes to appointing an attorney, you can request that your client get an attorney for free through the court that is community paid. I think that a lot of courts will say they just don't have the funding, but they do. They really, really do. I went to a training recently, well, this last year, it was Access to Justice training, and there was actually an attorney up north in Seattle. That's all she does. She represents survivors of sexual assault. So I can certainly find that address and send it along the way too. But it is okay to ask for assistance with an attorney in the courtroom for your client. I think this is just really, really important because, you know, they're going up against somebody that they're afraid of. It could be somebody they know or don't know. So I think it's just really important to have that information. But this RCW 7.90, it's really important to really, I think it's really important for you guys to have this handy and to really reevaluate it. Not because obviously you're not attorneys and sometimes the language can be really confusing, but it's important to understand how, the extra tools to advocate for your clients, especially in the courtroom, and especially with their sexual assault protection orders and what they're allowed to put in there. Do any of you go to SANE exams? Have you been to a SANE exam for anybody?
I'm too new, so I haven't done one yet, but I will.
Okay. If you ever do, you know, one of the things is that law enforcement will generally almost get to the client before you do. Because if the person goes in for a SANE exam, generally what happens is the client will be there in the hospital. That's generally done in the hospital. There are exams done for children, like in Olympia, and I know in King County they have it where there's sexual assault clinics for children. We have Monarch and agencies that will actually do exams there through St. Peter's Hospital. They actually do it in the clinic. The reason why I'm saying all of that is because a lot of times law enforcement will talk to the client first, and then they'll really try to push a protection order or restraining order right then and there. And that's not an appropriate place. But I think that's a good place to talk about to the client how you can assist them with the SAPO, the sexual assault protection order, how you can assist them. And that may be somebody you don't even know. They've never, ever been to an agency. If you've ever gone to a SANE exam, that's a good way to represent yourself. If you guys are allowed to do that, I don't know. I know the Hope Alliance and Turning Point and Safe Place out here on this side of the world does it here on the west side, but not a lot of agencies are dual program either, so it just depends. But if you ever go in there, and that's something to expect, and it's okay to talk to the client about, you know, getting and representing, you know, helping to assist them with their sexual assault protection orders, you know, how advocacy work, you know, just giving them resources. I just can't stress that enough, because they're already going to be freaked out anyway. So if you've never been through a SANE exam, you've never seen a SANE exam, it is the most exposing experience for everybody, for somebody to get that. They're literally telling their story to 2 or 3 times during an exam. The exam can take 5 to 7 hours, sometimes 8 hours. The whole process of a hospital SANE process. I've gone many times, and there's times I'm like, oh, we got out in 5 hours. That was quick, you know. I've been into, so it's just really important to understand what to expect. When we're talking about underserved communities, you know, again, there's that stigma that happens, and I'm kind of reverting back to that. Sorry, kind of bouncing around. It's really important to let that person know that they're heard and that there's help, and you know, they're already ashamed. They already have shame that's kind of coming with this, especially with sexual assault. So it's just really important to be present and to be there and to be understanding and to know that there's a network of people. You know, I encourage you guys like to reach out to me if you need to. You know, I still volunteer with Hope Alliance. I still do some things with them. I don't think I'll ever not be an advocate. I just, you know, it's in me. It's 16 years of this stuff, and you know, I can't just like walk away. I've tried to walk away 3 times, just so you know. The actual burnout of an advocate is 3 years. So you have to make sure you take care of yourself. I tried to leave 3 times, and I like came back. Now I've left for sure this time, but not really, right? Because now I'm going to volunteer with Hope Alliance. I'm, you know, reached out to other agencies around me to help kind of assist with different things. Legislative stuff as well, you know, as we know. So, but as far as sexual assault, you know, the rules kind of change sometimes when it comes to the legal stuff, and it's just a matter of just kind of keeping up. I think the agency that you guys are working with, Rosalinda, I think it's just absolutely amazing. I didn't know about her until recently. So, and I think there's a lot of other agencies like what you guys are involved in. I'd love to hear more about that, by the way, just so you know, if you just reach out to me, I'd really love to be able to connect with you and send stuff to you if you need stuff, resources. You know, I didn't want to take up a whole long time today, and there's a lot of information, and I didn't want to like info dump on you so much that you're going to walk away more than you are now with your head full. There's a lot, but I think what I gave you today, I hope was helpful, to at least give you an idea of where you stand legally as an advocate, legal advocacy, sexual assault protection orders. What does that entail? If you have never seen one, like I said, just go on, well, when the site's up, go online and pull one up. If you have an agency that deals with sexual assault protection orders, I would encourage, you should already have them handy, hopefully in your files, that you can just pull up for when a client comes in, rather than just online. It's really important to have handy. And so I think that's about all I have. I appreciate you all. If you have any questions for me?
I don't have any questions other than I will take you up on your contact info for a networking opportunity. I think you'd be really helpful for the moments where I'm stuck, because I know eventually I will get there.
Yes, no, I encourage you, please, because there's not, you know, when I started out, in 2008, there was, there was a lot out there, but not really. We really had to navigate. There's my email. You guys can email me anytime, honestly. When I started out at Turning Point in 2008. I was still with my ex-husband. A year later, I was divorced because the advocates surrounded me. They really encouraged me, and I got out. I divorced after 23 years of marriage. I've been with him for 25 years, but we were married for 23. And so that's where it started. In Mason County, they already had a sexual assault response team there. They already had that an agency set up, but it dismantled, I think, around 2011 or 12. And then Turning Point took on those clients. They got certified and then started doing sexual assault work. The really weird thing is we never went to the hospital. I don't know what they do now. I'm not just dissing that. I'm just saying back then we didn't go to sexual assault exams. I never went to a sexual assault exam actually until I started working for Hope Alliance in 2019. So that was really huge. And then we went into lockdown 6 months later after I started. That's when COVID hit. So then I was home for 2 years, basically. And then, all the other changes that came. But I will say that, having a sexual assault response team in your agency or in your town, I don't know, some places don't have that. You're supposed to, by grants, right? By DSHS and all the umbrellas, right, that we're under funding. You're supposed to have a sexual assault response team somewhere in your county, but some counties don't, I would imagine, or towns.
Well, and let me just add too, is that may or may not also depend on whether you're an accredited sexual assault program or
Yes.
you're a culturally specific program. So
Yes.
it's not to say that you couldn't do it even if you're not required to, because it's just another form of supporting survivors.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I think it may be the CSAPs that are charged with making sure that they have a response team.
Yes. Yes. Well, it's important though, and I don't know. I think times have changed so much, and it's so, I don't know. I have my own opinions. I'll keep them to myself, but can I
just add real quick on that note? It just made me think that that's another opportunity for the culturally specific programs to do that networking with the agencies that do have those responses. In the event that you could create some partnership about if a survivor would perhaps be better served by your agency, under what circumstances would they potentially call you to connect with that survivor? But be careful. I mean, be very clear about your boundaries, your agency boundaries, and your advocate boundaries, because you don't want to be in a position where the understanding from the CSAP is that they're going to call you any and every time, no matter what time of day or night it is. Right. And then be mad if you're not available to respond or to say, oh, they dropped the ball. So be very clear about, if your agency is only available during business hours, then that should be in your memorandum of understanding, and exactly who they should call and what the process is. So just wanted to add that in there, that it's an opportunity for growth, but also be very clear about establishing expectations and boundaries.
I thank you for sharing that. That is absolutely true. Like with in Centralia, they are 24/7. They have a 24/7 line, the phone calls. Each advocate is required to do so many days a month, over the weekend, 24/7. During the business days, obviously during the business hours, they're there, and whoever gets the call goes, like to a SANE exam or answers. But then they have the phone lines at night. The advocates do. There was one advocate that she loves to do her 5 days straight. I said no. For me, it was like, no, I have to have, like, I'll just pick random days. And required for an entire weekend to do it. So you're right. And it depending on the funding and depending on their MOUs and all that. So yes. So, but to be able to at least network with these agencies, not everybody's on board, when it comes to the underserved, right? So it is really important though to put your name out there. What I did, a lot of things, what I did, and I still do, is in my own town, for instance, here at Hope or even in Mason County, I went to the courthouse, I introduced myself, I walked around to lawyers, said, hey, this is who I am. I'm here to help. If you have anybody, send them our way. We're going to help them. We're going to do what we can, if we can, right? Because of, conflict. We had to obviously do conflict checks and things like that, can't serve the perpetrator, but it is important to really have that network. And I think it's important for advocates to network with each other, no matter where you are in our state or wherever. It's important to network all over the country. I had made friends in different parts of the country, in different states, because maybe I was assisting the client trying to get to a different location, right, for help or whatever. It's just so important. And I think sometimes, in my opinion, over the years, I have seen some agencies just sort of pigeonhole themselves just to represent themselves. Does that make sense? They're not reaching out to other people because we don't always have the answers, and so when it comes to especially the LGBTQ community, the underserved, maybe culturally specific communities, I'm a white girl and I need educated, right? And Hope Alliance actually has 4 bilingual advocates. It's amazing. They have 4 bilingual advocates now. And so I learn from each person that I connect with. So, because I'm not always going to have all the answers. So I just really, really encourage that. I think that's a perfect point, Rosalinda.
I want to say one more thing, which is that I want to connect this to right before this, we were talking about working collaboratively and setting boundaries. And then yesterday we talked about service standards. So as you're talking, I want to kind of bring all of those pieces together and say that all of this relationship building that has been talked about, especially today, that in and of itself, that time that you spend outreaching to colleagues and building those relationships and being nice to the court workers or folks at other programs, that's what's called systems coordination. So even if you're not talking on behalf of a particular individual survivor, doing that networking is systems advocacy, which is allowable under the service standards. So in other words, it's recognized as necessary time for advocates to spend in order to better serve our communities. And likewise, when we're doing outreach to potential survivors, that's also allowable, like for me, when I was working with street youth, literally walking the streets was outreach in order to raise awareness about services. So sometimes the activities look kind of like they're the same thing. But again, it's just like when we were talking about prevention and whether or not you're doing skill building or whether or not you're doing social change work. There's one umbrella that both of those live under, but ask yourself, what is the intention? Why am I spending my time doing this? Why should I utilize my time either outreaching and building relationships with clients or potential clients or with other systems workers? So just wanted to try to tie all that together.
No, that's perfect. I agree. It's amazing to me. Hope Alliance here used to be Human Response Network. And they've been around, I think, like 30 years, some long number, right? And then during COVID, they changed the name and location and all the things, right? Bigger office. Still, people didn't know we were here. Didn't know, had no idea. We meet people all the time. So I love the networking. I think that's really, really important. When you go do a pop-up or when you go to a senior center, I had recently gone to a senior center, they were doing activities and playing bingo, but I had a table there along with other people because it was sort of a community event. Anything you can do to get your name out there is really, really important because honestly, people don't know. When I left my husband, in 2009. When we moved to Washington, I had no idea. I lived in Portland. I lived in Portland for 14 years before that. I lived all over. We moved a lot. And so not one, and we were involved in church. Okay. We were in a religious community. Not one person said to me, hey, I'm recognizing there's a problem with your family, right? And not one person offered any help. I had no idea that domestic violence agencies or sexual assault agencies even existed until I came to Washington, and I was kind of forced to work in one because had come to Washington and got on TANF. He had to go to school and I had to go to work. That was the deal. And the worker, with all her wisdom, sent me to a domestic violence agency who just built in 2008. Turning Point had just built their building. Actually, they were working out of different places before that, but they had just built their first shelter, 54-bed shelter. It's the third largest shelter in Washington. And so I had no idea. 1 year later, divorced, free. So that's the kind of networking I'm talking about. That's the kind of that Rosalind is talking about, is getting the word out, because I had no idea there were places for all those years. Nobody told me. So when you are putting a face to something, when you are out there, you are making such a difference. You really are. It may not feel like it sometimes at the end of the day, because this work is so hard. It is so hard, and it's underappreciated. And if you have any kind of a soul, you're going to take that work home with you in your brain, right? You're going to, in your heart, in your, relationships, and you're in your communities. When you're going to the grocery store, you're going to see your client, things like that. So networking is super, super important too. And that's where the prevention work comes in, and, just making it known. So I absolutely agree.
Thank you for joining us for Legal Advocacy and Court Orders, featuring Sherri Donley. If you would like more information, you can reach out directly to Sherri at Greater Justice PS. For more information or for other trainings from the Ripple Project, please visit www.weartheripple.org. Thank you. And I encourage you to do something every day to cultivate joy in your life. This is hard work.